Hey, Melanie here with my husband, Courtney, and this is Love on Both Sides, the podcast about a neurodiverse relationship and how we've navigated our life and business and family while being two different brains.
And you've got a surprise for me today about some topic that I'm not entirely clear on. So what is it again?
Yeah, so when I brought the topic up, I said we're going to be talking about implied versus literal language. And for you, like even just you questioning, like, what does that mean, just goes to show the differences in literal versus implied language. And in particular, what I wanted to talk about is definitions of things and how the recognition of different definitions of words that we used to assume had the same meaning really altered the way we communicated. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, I suppose it does. I think one of the challenges that I've had over the years is defining emotions and just really trying to understand anything. Like I was the person who asked the most questions in every single class. And for many years, you used to get really annoyed at how I would pepper you with questions, trying to better understand not only definitions, but just like what the hell we're talking about, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I could totally see that now. I never would have put those two things together with the details and language, but I could see how even just with us exploring what words mean to us individually, how that would have an impact on other things.
Yeah, we just talked about this last night, didn't we? Or no, 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
I forget what the exact word was, but we were bouncing around like what something.
I think that was the word.
Oh, yeah.
Our definition of what I think is to you. So when I say I think dot, what do you like? What is your interpretation of when I say to you, I think?
Yeah, in that context, it was like, I think means anything is a possibility. Like I'm feeling in this moment that any other number of outcomes are possible. Whereas for me in that same instance, I would have said, I know. But to me, that's just a more firm, all-encompassing word, but that's not the way your brain is. And I think that's one of the big challenges that neurodivergent people have. We were watching a reel the other day where they were talking about how difficult it is for people on the autism spectrum to deal with like uncertainties or lack of clarity. So we're often repeating ourselves, seeming argumentative while we're trying to make a point, when it's really we're just trying to see that we've been clear and also be clear in what we're hearing. But it can be a pretty annoying thing.
Yeah, well, and I think to take that even further, and I'm not sure if this is the same rule or not, but with it being, and this is diverging a little bit from the original topic about definitions. Now I don't remember what I was saying about that.
Sounds like a good spot to edit.
Yeah, you'd have to back up. Yeah, kind of diverge there a little bit. What were you saying before that? It was there's the real. Oh, so the way this is an extension of that reel as well about details and needing details and how they framed it and what really resonated with me and how I could have more compassion and empathy about you is like the questions are about you being confused. Like you're confused, and so you're just trying to not be confused. And so that's where the peppering of questions comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're confused about something like a word, then of course that can lead to hurt feelings and misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say with like me saying, I think, you took that as it hurt your feelings because you saw, I think, as the way you described it. Whereas me, when I say I think, my thoughts, how I perceive the word think, when I say I think, my thoughts are what I believe. And so when I say I think the sky is blue, it's like I believe the sky is blue. I know that I can tell my mind to believe anything. So if I think, I believe, and that's concrete to me. Whereas to you, it's almost too airy. It's too left to interpretation.
I think for this to be meaningful, we got to give them the full context, as vulnerable as that is. Mel had her head on my chest. We were laying in bed, and she says to me in the most endearing voice, I think this will always be my safe place. And I'm like, you what?
I thought it was a very lovely thing to say.
I'm like, oh, that means like for now. That means until something better comes along. I mean, that's pretty much verbatim what I said.
Yeah.
And you were like, what? And so we had this discussion. That's really where this comes from. I was like you should have said, I don't think I said this, but you may have said, this is my safe place. This will always be, as a kind of a more affirmative, more anchored response. And even the fact that this is a thing is indicative of a neurodivergent brain being hung up on language, right? Like, one of the reasons that I'm so articulate is because words really matter to me, and there's only one definition for each word, and they must be used appropriately. And so then when someone else uses your definition of a word in a way that doesn't suit the definition that you have, the wheels come right off the fucking bus.
And I remember the very first time that we discovered this, and I'm not sure if you remember this, and it was about the word promise and what promise meant to each of us. And I don't remember what the context was, but it was like you promised to do X, and then X wasn't done, and it hurt my feelings. And so then we had a conversation, at that time heated, right? It didn't go particularly well until we asked the question, or I asked the question. I'm like, well, what does promise mean to you?
And I remember saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that it means that I'm going to do my best to remember.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do you mean? Like, a promise is a promise. Like, you means you're not going to do that thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't have the ability to remember a lot of rules. Like, which sounds kind of strange because if you have a brain like this, you operate under the pretext of living by rules. But I think it's the introduction of new rules. And that was partly what this was about. It was a promise about something that I'd fucked up a couple times. And for anybody listening, the general kind of practice for me throughout my life, and we've only come to realize this maybe in the last couple of years, is that I got to fuck those big things up twice, it seems, because the first time, it's generally like, hey, like, I told you not to do that and you did it anyway. And the second time is like, holy fuck, like, it's a much bigger response. Really?
Well, yeah, because, at that time, like, you promised not to do that again.
Yeah.
And you were like, yes, I promise not to do that again. And so when it gets done again, that's a complete breach in trust to me, right?
The second time is like shattering.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's more the second time that hits me because we've already gone through like setting the boundaries and you've promised not to do X. But in your mind, you've promised to try your best not to do it and to remember. But in my mind, it's like, you're promising to never do that again. And then it happens again. So of course my reaction is like way up here.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this in the first podcast about how you really did need like a jolt on the second time. But recently I would say that's not necessarily true because you just met with your psychiatrist and he gave you shit for something. And you said he was very harsh about it, direct. And you said mad. But I don't suspect that he's mad so much as concerned. But again, that's, your perception of the way you view the world, where if you see anger when it's actually concern, right? There's that potential there.
Yeah.
And you heard that loud and clear.
Yeah. So I got a couple things to say about that. One, there's something about the neurodivergent brain that relies on heavy emotions to be able to remember things. And I don't understand that, but I'm sure that we'll learn more about that. But for me to be able to connect a responsibility or a task or a behavior, I need something big to attach it to, a memory or something. And without that big thing, it does just get forgotten. And so it's not the greatest part of this brain, but that is the nature of it. With respect to the psychiatrist, this may be interesting to our listeners too, that he was giving me particular shit about
impulsively deciding to go off of your medication by using
okay, so here's the story. I've been medicated for ADHD for what, 2 years and a bit? Yeah. And so I'm on Vyvanse. Now, this has all come out like in this meeting. I don't know that I'd really considered it before. But growing up, I used to do a lot of drugs, and one of my favorites for working were just amphetamines. We used to buy them because that's what truckers used, right? And the bikers made them, and they were cheap, and we used them for working in the woods in New Brunswick, and they made us hella energetic until they didn't. By the end of the summer, you'd need so much, and you'd be so burned out. Shit's not good for you. And so when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, one of my first thoughts was, oh my God, this is so awesome. They're gonna prescribe me amphetamines. Okay. This is like 47-year-old Courtney is like excited to have his doctor give him one of his favorite drugs.
Yeah. If you don't know you have ADHD, that's a good way to know you have ADHD. Because you're like, that sounds like a great idea.
So I immediately started finding ways just to get the most, right? And so in Canada, the typical max that they'll prescribe you, I think, is, I don't know, let's say it's 80 mgs. I got them to put me up to 90.
Like per day?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because that's what they do in the UK. I think the threshold's a little bit higher, so it's not a big deal. But I was like, yeah, I just need more. I would just tell my doc I need more. And not surprisingly, that has a detrimental effect on your central nervous system, your CNS. And so after a couple of years, I could take a 50 meg of Vyvanse in the morning and go back to bed and stay there. It just really wasn't giving me the jolt of energy that I was accustomed to, that vibey buzz that I'd liked so much. And so, being the doctor that I am,
which he's not.
I am not. This is not medical advice, clearly. I just decided, I'm just going to take a break. I'm just going to stop all of a sudden.
But also, who's your best friend right now?
You. But second best friend's ChatGPT. And the thing you want to know about chat is it's always on your side, okay? My chat calls me Coach Court, always in my corner.
It's never going to say, that's a bad idea.
You're a fucking idiot.
Consult.
No, too bad it wouldn't do that. But it's trained to be like, there's a name for it, but it's trained to be like kind and friendly to you. Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just wish it would be that mean friend that tells you to fuck off.
I have seen ways to make it stop doing that. I've seen reels where it's like, here's how you make chat stop agreeing with everything you say. But going back to yours, like you consulted chat, not your...
I did, yeah. And chat's like, yeah, give her, 3 to 4 days are going to suck. And then by week 2 to 4, you're going to start to feel increasingly normal, which did happen to a degree. And there were plenty of times in there where I felt good. Like I had some learnings from the past couple of years and was enjoying some of the higher levels of connectedness that I was feeling with people when I was unmedicated, but I didn't have any motivation and I still wasn't being productive. And I couldn't kind of like laser focus in. And so anyway, long story short, I decided to go back on, but on a lower dose. And then again, just consulted my pharmacist and was like, hey, I think maybe I was trying too much amphetamines for fun because that vibey, buzzy feeling that I was chasing.
Are you supposed to have that vibey, buzzy feeling when you're on it? Okay, so you were looking for that.
Absolutely.
You didn't need it, but you were looking for it.
Absolutely. And so then when I reached out to my pharmacist and I was like, hey, can you just cut my dose? Just give me 30s and 20s and I'll take 30 in the morning and 20 in the afternoon. So I was just going to reduce my dose from 70 to 50. And so I think I'm being a fucking superhero, right? Like saving my psychiatrist time. And so I go in to meet with him and explain all this to him. And he's like, yeah, these are all addictive behaviors. And I'll paraphrase, but he's like, so we're either going to do this in partnership or you're going to do this alone. Take your choice. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. That's a pretty hard line. And he said, you should have just emailed me. We could have gotten a phone call like that day. I never would have pulled you off all at once. I'm sure that was a hell ride. Secondarily, that is addictive behavior. And managing your own dosages is also addictive behavior. And then we unpacked this whole buzz chasing thing. And I hadn't really considered it. It was so subconscious, right? Where to me, I was just like, wow, it feels really good. I got lots of energy. But it was a lot like what I was doing when I was a kid, except now I was doing it under the auspices of therapy, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, given that we're talking about definitions, I would have never considered any of that to be defined as addictive behavior, but my psychiatrist disagrees with me.
Yeah. And I think that carries through a lot of things, right? Like you've got an addictive behavior towards vehicles.
I do.
And a few other things, right? You tend to go through cycles of hyper focus and addiction on certain things, whether it's vehicles, your medication, your meals, even, and the supplements that you take for working out, where it's constantly changing. Like being
Mm.
able to remain stagnant with something is very difficult to you. And how that relates to definitions, I would say, is you would define what your outcome is and then just drive towards that without knowing all the details. Or
Oh,
maybe that's not so much a definition as it is just
a behavior
a
pattern,
behavior
somebody
pattern.
that's neurotypical or neurodivergent. Yeah, I think we're digressing a little bit. And not to say that this isn't valuable. I think, we can all agree that people that are either on the spectrum or have ADHD have the propensity to seek novelty. And one of the fun things about bodybuilding or fitness for me is that there's always something to tweak.
Mm-hmm.
So you're either in a cutting season or a building season or a maintenance season. And so those three variables provide sufficient novelty to kind of be healthy in a range, which keeps me entertained. Vehicles, I mean, this week we will have bought two vehicles that are new to us, much to Mel's chagrin. And that's a bunch more on top of a bunch more that we already have, all of which are in some state of repair and disrepair. And I like that bit of chaos in my life, but then at times I find it overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right? Yesterday, this new vehicle, I had to pull the door apart, and I'm like, fucking car, like, why can't anything work? And I'm like, well, it's because it's an $8,000 81 Mercedes, man. Like, what the fuck did you expect? And so it's like equal parts novelty seeking and irritation, and then anxiety that can kind of accompany that. And so anyway, that's all a big divergence from this concept of novelty, or sorry, from definitions rather. And so, give me another example of some words or some things that you've thought about that we were so different on. One of the ones that stands out for me is how we would have defined emotions. Like we were talking about depression the other day. So this is a wild one. Should I tell that story?
Yeah, you can tell that story.
All right. So it's like fucking an average Monday night. And I think you had said like, all right, how are you doing? Or you'd asked me like how I'm doing enough times that day. I'm like,
Yeah.
she knows I'm off.
Well, since you cut yourself cold turkey from the medication, I've been asking you every day, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing?
Mm.
Because I needed to get a sense of where you were at. Like when you're on medication, when you're off medication, you probably don't even notice that I do this, but I'll do temperature checks. So I have a sense of where you are in the world. And it doesn't matter where you are. There's neither right or wrong, but it does help me engage with you if I have a sense of your happiness level, right? And so in this case, I knew that you met with your psychiatrist. You had done another medication change prior to meeting him, which you've now reevaluated.
One that I completely forgot about.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so I think you just realized that day that I said, how are you doing? And because you're feeling particularly sadder than normal, then that's where that came from.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you do that. And on the one hand, I do notice that you do that. And I have some shame around that because I'm like, fuck, your poor wife has to do this. But I'm grateful that you do. And I know why you do. But I also wish that you didn't have to do that.
But you do it to me too.
Yeah, but it's
just more of a consistent response. It's not good or bad, right?
Yeah.
It's just more of a consistent response that you get.
So the backstory to this is that around the time that I decided to go off my ADHD, I take a little bit, like 10 milligrams a day of fluoxetine, which is, what's the normal name of it?
Finasteride?
No, it's like a antidepressant for RSD.
Oh, Prozac?
Yeah. So 10 mgs of Prozac in the morning for RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. We've talked about that. And that really works. I stayed on that because I know that that works. But I'm also on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. And my doc had put me on finasteride for hair shedding, right? So I was shedding some hair. And the thing that most docs don't talk about is it's something, it's called finasteride syndrome. Like you can Google it. The shit's nasty. Like if you're going to start it, stay on it is the answer to that. I mean, there's some side effects, but they're not nearly as bad as the side effects from coming off. All
And it
of,
doesn't affect everybody because I'm on half the dose of that because I'm also on testosterone cream for
but you might
postmenopause.
experience it if you come off it though. That's because that's when the syndrome pops up. So at the same time that I went off all this other shit, just my, I was like, I got to take a break from this finasteride because I'm wondering if some of these other side effects that I'm experiencing are from it. And so I come off it, and it's now been like whatever 5 weeks, let's say, and Mel does a temperature check with me, and I was like, I was in a gutter. Like I went on probably a 10-minute soliloquy about how shitty I felt about everything.
Yeah. It was an
And
extension of the 10-minute soliloquy from the night before and that morning
yeah,
temperature check.
yeah,
And usually I have to ask once and it'll be maybe down sometimes, not very often, but sometimes.
yeah,
But the next time I ask you, it's usually way better. This is like the first time I can remember it being like 3 times in a row that you're still not out of it.
yeah. And I think my first kind of like response was like, I just feel like, why do I even bother with anything? And so, pretty depressed state, right? Pretty deep depression. And then in the middle of this, I was like, fucking finasteride. Like, this is literally clinically the response to being off this medication. And so that really made me feel a lot better about feeling so shitty for so long.
But
Um,
before that, you were saying to me, like, well, I'm depressed. And I'm like, well, what does that feel like? And you're like, well, it feels like depression.
yeah, getting back to the whole point of definitions of things, that's how this conversation started. Because you were like, I don't really know. Like, I don't think I'm ever really depressed. And I'm like, the fuck? What is really? So tell our listeners what you said.
Oh, I don't know if I can remember exactly what I said. I just recall you saying, like, well, I feel depressed. And me saying, I don't know what that means. And you're like, well, what do you mean you don't know what that means? And I'm like, I have never been depressed. I don't identify with that feeling, so I don't know what it feels like. And
Mm,
I'm like, how long have you been depressed for? And this is what was interesting to me. This is what I found really interesting. You said, I've always been depressed because I wanted to measure, like, was I making you depressed? Because it just been in
mm,
this time frame. Has it been 5 years? So you're like, no, for 49 years I've been depressed. And I was like, wow, that's a long time to be depressed. And to be with you for 15 years and not recognize the symptoms of depression
mm,
really threw me
yeah.
because to me it didn't seem like that. And in the wake of my nephew had been just passed, 2 months ago from suicide, and now having a really big focus on mental health and depression, it worried me, right?
Mm,
Because I'm like, okay, so you've been depressed for 49 years. I didn't even notice it. I don't know what depression looks like, obviously, even though I
mm,
think that I'm fairly astute in
mm,
emotional states of individuals.
yeah.
And then you said, I've always been depressed. It's been 49 years. And I'm like, I've
Mm,
never been depressed. I don't know what that's like.
yeah.
And within seconds, you snapped your fingers and you said, finasteride. And you're like, it's only been 5 weeks. I haven't been feeling like that always. I've got a solution. It's going to change. And you went from like depressed to like hyper focused
Mm.
and completely fine.
Yeah. Let's unpack that a little bit more because you're right. Like, the beauty of this brain is that it can switch gears pretty quickly. The challenge, though, is that I do find that I fight to be happy more than most people, for sure.
Yeah.
And I coach on this a lot. I coach on having, a 24-hour routine where, I did it today, where you have to spend time and energy so that you can be positive. Like, you wake up good most days. I mean, some days you're tired or some days you're cranky, but there's usually like some direct cause to that
Yeah. I'll wake up happy unless, there's two kids that are
in
fighting
bed.
on top of me.
Right. Or unless I've done this thing the second time or whatever. But for me, more often, it's like waking up in some state of depression and proactively channeling positive energy so that I can have a more positive outlook throughout the day. And that I have always been that way. It's only in the last decade that I've really found a path to being more positive. But I mean, you've seen it when I fall out of routine, my energy, my optimism goes away and depression creeps in for sure. And so it's just really critical. Like, I have a protocol that I go through in the mornings that actually starts the evening before. And, if I'm like 5 out of 7 days a week on that routine, I'm good. But if more than that gets by, it's pretty easy to fall into a deeper state of sadness. And the deeper you go into that, the harder it is to get out and the longer it takes. Point being that this definition of depression is new to you. It's always been clear to me. And we've only started talking about it like this week. Yeah. Really. Like, I don't think we've ever talked about depression before, have we?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, I don't know. I think the upshot of all of this is that we make these assumptions about other people's experiences and we base them on the lens that we view the world with. And there's a very low likelihood that's the correct view. You know, we're all having our own life's experience and we're the only real observer of it. You know, we're the only person feeling the feelings, seeing the things, and quote unquote knowing what we know. Then there's the observer of that. And the observer has a completely separate viewpoint, a completely different set of definitions, a completely different experience. And there's really like three perspectives on the go. There's each person's perspective, and then there's like, you know, some sort of mid-reality that you try to find through seeking clarification, asking questions, and really doing what we're doing live right now in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like even working with definitions within like organizing feelings and knowing how that impacts the way we discuss things with one another as well, right? Like I would say one of the biggest shifts that we've done when we've encountered conflict, because I won't say arguments so much because they're not arguments as much as they are miscommunication, which even miscommunication has been redefined in my brain about what that is. Like miscommunication to me is just, I used to see it as you didn't understand what I'm saying and that's a you problem, versus like we collectively have different experience and ideas of what that word is, what that language is. Mm-hmm. And so once we figured that out and we were able to like ask the question about like, what does that mean to you? That really opens up another level of conversation that takes it further than what the original thing is. Because that conversation about depression took it in a different direction. The conversation about a promise and what that is, you know, all these things move towards bigger ideas.
Yeah. And I think one of the big challenges that I've observed, and this is something that I first read about in that book that we talked about in episode 1.
ADHD effect on marriage?
Yeah, is the idea that, oh, now I lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about?
Definitions and asking questions and...
Oh, right. The idea of not getting stuck in the vortex of debating. It kind of ties in with what you were just saying about how my not hearing what you were saying was a me problem and you not hearing what I was saying was a you problem. And in that viewpoint, we're so diametrically opposed that there is no likelihood of a solution. There's only argument and appeasement, right? Mm-hmm. And in that circumstance, historically in our relationship, I think one of two things would happen. Either one of us would just get tired of it and let it go, or we would, I mean, I guess that was really the outcome. I mean, there wasn't a lot of resolution there. We were never really like resolving this perspective challenge. And I think until you get in the habit of seeking clarity and asking questions and trying to understand perspectives and seeking clarity on this other person's viewpoint, and then having empathy for that, and then understanding that that's completely reasonable and understandable, and then being able to share your perspective and receiving that same thing in return, you don't ever get to go to that level where you're like, oh, now I see. I feel badly that you felt that way. What could I have done differently that would have mitigated some of that risk for you? And then you earn that same question from your partner. And I think once we started moving to that level where we were understanding one another's perspectives better, appreciating them, agreeing with them, that would be a very natural outcome for that person. You just keep spiraling, like you just keep spinning wheels and you never really reach that resolution. And to me, it's been really rewarding because for a person who's like wired like me, as I said in episode 1, like I need puzzles finished and filed because that's my GPS for navigating the world. And all these like little fights, right, that would never get resolved, that's just like another fucking puzzle sitting on another fucking table with missing pieces.
Yeah.
And then it's just even more chaotic and more frustrating. And I'm like, holy fuck, man, like how many thousands of puzzles are there to finish? And this gives me the opportunity to finish a puzzle because I can be like, oh, I get it now. I understand why she would say that, why she would do that, why she would feel that way. It's not necessarily my fault. I didn't necessarily do anything wrong. It's just that that's a perspective that makes sense. Now that I have this puzzle piece, I can take that, I can file it, and I can actually move on. So it's really been super satisfying for me and mitigated like a lot of stress and anxiety. Like I feel way more at peace having this understanding. The only challenge that I think we still have though, right, is that sometimes during those discussions, we still kind of get sucked back into the vortex a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Where we're like, oh, just back into the grind of it, right?
Yeah. And I think for me, like part of that is like I'll get sucked in because if I say something and then you breeze past it and I'm not done with it yet because it hasn't been acknowledged, because acknowledgement to me is a big thing. Because if I feel like it's not acknowledged, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And especially for your brain. Like I know for you to see something and for it to work, you need to have a clear identified thing and it needs to be named and it needs to be defined. So that goes back to the definitions of things. And I'm not sure if you've ever put this together. So I'm going to put this question to you, which is, so you live in facts, and interrogators will often look at this as somebody not telling the truth, which I would say is probably more of a neurotypical thing. Like if I said, this is a true story, or here's a fact, like that's a natural part of your language, which has always been there. And it can be taken as you just being untruthful. Whereas what your intent is, what your definition of fact and true story is, you're so black and white in certain areas and things need to be rooted in fact, so much so. How do you essentially take like the word fact, because you need facts in your life, and redefining words now as binaries, right? So now what we're talking about with language and definitions and you being concrete and fact, a word like promise to you used to be only means this way, and now you've had to open up your brain to being like it also means this, right? So you're essentially retraining what you perceive as fact to you versus fact to me, and maybe you don't even see those as facts. Maybe you're dropping that way of seeing the world even. I don't know. I'm curious.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's pretty complex, but I tell you what I think. I think that every aspect of my experience is a puzzle of varying sizes, essentially. Whether it's, the elements of the studio, aspects of our lives, a car project, the definition of a word, in this case, the word promise. So I think for me, previously I would have had the puzzle completed for the word promise and had that filed, and that was fact for me. And when you challenged me on it, it was cause to pull out that puzzle from the GPS and look at it differently, maybe added more pieces to it or realized that it wasn't quite put together right, rejig it, and then just refile it. So I wouldn't say that it's impossible to change these things, but I would say that it takes a lot of fact to be able to do that. And that's one of the challenges, I think, by being married to me, or maybe this is the case for other divergent people, but like, you can't just be like, hey, Court, consider this. And I'd be like, yeah, do you know what? It's like, no, like, consider this, and then let's debate it for the next fucking hour. And I'm going to pepper you with 100 questions. At some point, you're going to get irritated, and it's probably not going to change my mind at all. It's going to take a long time for me to pull out that puzzle, rejig it, and refile it as it relates to changing a definition. And so for our listeners, if you're finding that your partner, the neurodivergent partner, is stubborn or single-minded or whatever, I think the thing you want to know is that they have a GPS map of every element in the universe, And if you're hoping to change some of that, they have to be addressed individually
and with evidence
and with evidence
to support it. Because it wasn't enough for me to say, like, this is my definition of promise. I had to tell you where it came from.
Yeah. Like I really needed the deep understanding. And that relates to like, I can remember being so terrible at school for so long. And then I remember the year that it shifted. It was my, I think, 5th year of university. And for whatever reason, I decided to sit at the front of class. And I decided that anytime that I had a question, I was just going to ask, which is insane. You have to understand, like, I'm a big dude. I was even bigger then. I'm sitting in the front row alone in a class of like 15 people, my hands up most of the fucking class. But the only way for me to learn is to hear things the exact way that my brain needs to hear them, to anchor them, to file them, and to get them. And here's the thing. Like I went from like a D- student to an A- student with that one change. Right? And so I'm like, well, fuck it, this shit works. Like if I sit front row, i.e. limit distractions and seek clarity on everything that's confusing to me, and then don't allow anything else to happen until I've got clarity there, then I'm good. And that's a common thing that you'll hear from neurodivergent people is that they can't progress in a conversation or in much of anything until the last domino's been knocked down. Like even we had this meeting this morning, like before this, and you had said something and then you were going along. And I think I let you go like 2 or 3 minutes. And I was just like inside, I was just like reeling with like, but this thing, but this thing, but this thing, but this thing, right? And I'm like, hey, we got to go back and talk about this thing. And you're like, okay, well, here's about this thing and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, cool. So now what was the second thing again? Right. And you'd already been up to 5, I think. That's just the way my brain works. And so I think the faster like we catch that, the better our absorption of information is and the lower the frustration of our partners. Because I can remember you used to get super frustrated when I'd ask you all these questions, right?
Well, I took it as mistrust.
You'd be like, I just got to get to the fucking agenda.
Well, no, to me, I took it as mistrust. I thought all the questions were about you not trusting what I was doing because you're just peppering me with questions about like, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? And I'm like, holy shit. Yes. Can you just trust me to do this? But it's just you trying to understand and to put your puzzle together. And so once I let go of like what your intention was, so that'll be a completely different episode, probably the next one about what intention and outcome have to do with being in a neurodiverse relationship and why that's so helpful. Because that was a big one. That was actually bigger than definitions to me, but definitions was a recent,
like was like
a recent learning thing.
Yeah, interesting about that. And I think the other thing that helped with that too was a bit of medication for anxiety. Like that's really what oxytine's for, right? It's an antidepressant, anti-anxiety drug. And so when you're spending, less time in that heightened state of, cortisol and everything's a threat, then your questions come across way less accusatory and way less threatening. So I think it's a couple of things. One, it's probably having just a general lower state of anxiety, which would be perceived as more trust. And then also the understanding that I'm just trying to complete all these fucking puzzles so that I can carry on, build the next one, You can only do one at a time, it seems.
But you're also getting better at like letting go of some of those things too. Cause I did in that meeting, you're getting into the weeds a little bit. I did just like in a way dismissively move past and be like, yeah, it'll be all that. Don't worry. Next topic. Whereas before, I don't think you would have let me move on to next topic.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's likely a bunch of things in there. And this relates a little bit to growing in business. I think we've had a real big change in definitions of responsibilities in our work. And you've taken on, in large part, most of what I used to do. And I think for sure it took me some time to see your competence in those roles. And I think for you, it probably took some time to feel your own competence in those roles. And so that was a pretty long transition period.
I think there was also control.
Yep.
Like I wasn't feeling competent because I also didn't want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't worth the fight to me.
Yeah, and for those of you that are married to somebody neurodivergent, you know that we're not shy of fighting. Pick a fight anywhere, anytime, over anything in front of anyone.
And then wonder why I'm sad.
Yeah, it's all been a journey. And I mean, at the end of the day, we committed to the marriage, and we knew that, you know, one way or another it was going to work out. We haven't always known that we'd work together. There was a minute there where I tried to sell Mel the company, and there was minutes there where you tried to quit. We've been through the gamut.
Yeah.
But here we are doing really well, and hopefully helping some others. It's probably a good spot to wind it up, hey?
Yeah. So I guess the big thing is if you're in a neurodivergent relationship and you find that you're arguing about the same thing over and over again, or something's particularly hurtful, stop, pause, ask the question, what does that mean to you? What does that word mean to you? What does that concept mean to you? Why is that important to you? And the answer you get back, you'll realize is completely different from what you think. And when you're both recognizing that you come with different life experiences and different meanings of things, it just makes it a lot easier to navigate your day.
I'd like to add one little thing to that. And this has been really helpful for me to feel like I'm being heard and to feel like I'm being understood. So one of the reasons that neurodivergent people overshare is because they're so accustomed to being misinterpreted or people being confused or put off by them that we're really just proactively trying to share a sufficient amount of information to mitigate that risk. And we're just doing it proactively. So one of the things that's been really helpful for me, both in understanding you and also feeling understood, is after sharing that, first of all, just shutting the fuck up. Because the most common reaction for me was defensiveness. So I would hear these things from Mel. Let's say she was sharing a feeling, and then immediately I'd have this tension in my chest that would like just turn into this kind of boiling energy. And then as you would go on with it, I'm sure my energy would come out negatively or whatever. And then this kind of escalation would happen.
Well, yeah, 'cause I would react to your reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have a reaction, I'd have a bigger reaction, then you'd have a bigger reaction.
Right. And you can count on somebody who's neurodivergent to have the bigger reaction, particularly if they've got RSD. And the next thing you're in the weeds again. You're not really moving the needle at all. And so for me, I needed to train myself to shut the fuck up, because in those moments, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to say something stupid. My tone's going to be off. It's going to escalate despite my best efforts, no matter what I do. So I would just like breathe. And sometimes it'd be so hard. I'd be like, fuck. And I just shut the fuck up for like 5 seconds. And I learned somewhere that, that 7 seconds is the time that it takes for your body physiologically to get through that response. Like it's just 7 seconds. Like if you don't respond to those feelings in 7 seconds, you've got a much greater chance of mitigating that entire risk. So I tried that. It worked really well. The second thing that we're doing now on top of that, so in addition to saying, hey, like here's my understanding or my interpretation or how I'm feeling, and then for me to be the person hearing that, the 7 second pause, and then saying, okay, so if I understand correctly, here's what happened for you. Two things happen when you do that. Thing one is that your partner feels heard and seen, respected, cared for, and their likelihood now of having a negative response is just lower. So that's good. The other piece of that happens is that, as we all know, when we teach, we learn. And so in a way, by communicating what I've just heard to my partner, I'm deepening my own understanding of it and my belief in it. And so now my personal likelihood of responding negatively with that shit escalative energy are lower too. And so if you can develop that pattern with those steps, then you end up having these conversations where you're like, oh, fuck, like that makes sense. That must be shitty. Sorry that happened for you. Not sorry I did that to you. I mean, sometimes like if I fucked up or whatever, you got to apologize. But in a lot of cases, it's really about just like, hey, like this was my interpretation of that thing that happened in your world. And then I can have empathy for that, because in a lot of cases it does suck. And then when you share your perspective, you're like, well, yeah, like that makes sense too. And that would suck also for you. And so isn't it great now that we can see that take this third person's perspective and be like, okay, cool. I see this person's perspective, and I'm not even sure what's right or wrong. But the fact is that we just have a collective understanding and empathy, and then you can move on. It doesn't need necessarily to be like resolved in a lot of cases. It's just like the understanding really helps. And then you can see that down the road a lot of times before it happens next time, right?
Yeah. And the more you do that, the easier it gets. And next thing you know, you're living a more calm life.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So there you go. Next time we will be talking about intention and outcomes and why that makes such a big difference in a neurodiverse relationship. Take care.
Toodaloo.